Hello and welcome to episode 83 of Linux Downtime. I'm Joe.
I'm Amalith.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Marcin.
Good to talk to you all and welcome to the show, Marcin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So you are the lead dev of asciinema.
That's correct.
Which is a project that we've talked a bit about on Late Night Linux, and I described as witchcraft, I think, at one point, which amused you.
Yeah, exactly. Many people find it unusually cool because they don't expect this can work and how it works, actually.
And for those of you who aren't already familiar with the project and haven't already listened to that particular Linux episode, it's a portmanteau of ASCII and Cinema. We should probably talk more about what the project is, because it is quite cool.
Yeah, so it kind of captures terminal output and makes a really nice interactive video.
That's correct. In fact, it's not a video. It's a pure text recording of a raw byte stream that your programs in your terminal output to your terminal. So it's the recordings made with EsSkinema are super lightweight. And because it's just a text, they can be replayed in any resolution, in very sharp fonts, scalable.
Yeah, and what you end up with is it looks like a video, but as you said, it's not, and it's just a really nice way to record terminal output, I guess, and so that's why you see it used on a lot of READMEs of especially CLI projects.
That's one of the cool things about the project, I think, is like you record where you work without switching context to, switching to like a screen recording software, going from your terminal. You can keep your hands on your keyboard and continue. You think like, oh, I'm going to record that. So you type asciinema rec, and then it starts a new shell, which gets recorded. So I think that's one. And the other is the lightweight aspect of it. And I try to make the player look as much as any modern video player, but in fact, it's not really a video there. In fact, the player embeds a lightweight terminal emulator, which is written in Rust and compiled to WebAssembly and embedded in the JS player.
Essentially, what we're talking about doing here is recording a terminal session using only text and timing. So you can play back the keystrokes in the order in the places that they appeared, but you're not using a big, heavy video codec. And in fact, you can't capture any of that stuff because it's just text and timings. If you want to compare it to something more widely understood, it's a lot like an SRT file on steroids.
Which is a file used for subtitles.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amalith.
And because the asciinema player is all text-based, it allows you to do things like copy-paste the commands that the person who recorded that video ran, and you can copy-paste their output as well into your terminal, into your text editor, and so on.
So, Marcin, one thing that I'm curious about, it's really cool to be able to use asciinema to record like a live session, and being able to embed that on like a GitHub page is pretty cool because you get a feeling of liveness that you're just not going to get seeing just the entire content of a short terminal session. But one of the possible issues with that is that everybody can also see the mistakes you make in the terminal. Is there any facility for like editing out bloopers when you've recorded a fairly long terminal session? You just don't want to look like an idiot?
Yes, so there's a bunch of tools around asciinema which do all sorts of editing, post-processing. There's a tool called asciinema edit, and there's a few others. There's nothing really built in right now in the core, but the ASCII-cast files, the recording format that asciinema recorder uses, these are plain text, JSON-based files that you can actually edit in your own editor. You can fire up Vim, and then Vim will not blow up because it's not a binary file. And then you can just find the places that you want to edit, and then you can remove them or change timing.
So proper nerd style. I didn't encrypt it, so do whatever you want with it. It's on you.
Well, so there are a few more things you can do. So one thing you can do is like, say you're recording and then you want to try something while recording, but you don't want this to be part of the recording. So you can press a Ctrl \, which pauses the capture, And then you can do anything and it won't get saved to the recording file. So it's like mute, for example, in a regular call. And then you press Ctrl / again and it starts recording again. So that's one of the things. Of course, this doesn't work if you make a typo because it already happened. But another thing that helps with making recordings more pleasant is a feature called idle time limiting, which basically reduces long pauses to the number of seconds you specify. So say you use option idle time limit, set it to 2 seconds. So then when you record, every idle moment that would be more than 2 seconds gets compressed to 2 seconds. So you can go for a walk for an hour, get back, and then only 2 seconds will be in the final recording.
I can feel myself looking more competent already. So normally we ask about, what it's like developing a Linux project or on a Linux platform, but given how low level the data primitives you're working with, it kind of seems like maybe there isn't really specifically a target here. It's just kind of a thing for working with data. Is that accurate?
That is correct. And that thing at the heart of the recorder is a old school thing called PTY, pseudo terminal, that originated in old Unix systems. And this is a capability of all Unix-like operating systems, which is also used by SSH, GNU Screen, Tmux, and programs like that. That's also the reason why from the day one, asciinema recorder worked on both Linux and macOS, because those are Unix-like systems. And these days, I know asciinema recorder runs on Windows in WSL. I haven't tried it myself because I don't want to touch that stuff, but I know people do it, so that works. But I feel Linux environment for me is the most developer friendly, since I've been developing on Linux, or in general, I've been developing for a long time. And it always feels like the most friendly way to do development for me, because there's the least amount of distractions. I can just focus, get in the flow. There's no like pop-ups. There's no like operating system like this. Yeah, you have new software updates, or you have something, or like bullshit stuff like the Windows start menu showing me local news.
What, you're saying you don't want to see Candy Crush adverts?
No.
Okay, so next question. Development environment. Are you using an IDE, or are you just using text editor to the console, or?
I wish I could say something different, but I use, these days I use VS Code, which is the least, well, it works and it saves me time, but I wish I had time to set up something else. So in my career, I've been a huge Vim user for many years. I've been developing in Vim for like a decade or something. Then I switched to Emacs thanks to SpaceMax with the evil mode, which is like the best Emacs ever. But then these days I work with multiple languages, Rust, Elixir, Python, and whatnot. So there's varying degree of support in various editors. And so if you're building your IDE on top of Vim, then in my opinion, you're in a world of hurt. I can see how like this time, investing this time can be beneficial for the future, for long term. Because I've been there. I've been crafting my Vim config for years as well. But these days, like the Rust and Elixir support in VS Code is just superb. So this really helps.
Getting an IDE-like setup in bare text editors requires a lot of work.
Yeah.
Using an IDE requires very little work, or making VS Code into an IDE is very easy. It comes with a lot of batteries included in my experience.
Yeah.
Because I was in a very similar situation. I usually use Doom Emacs when I'm writing any kind of code, but recently I've been trying to pick up Ruby for work, and I could have sat around trying to figure out which knobs to turn and which switches to flick, but I just installed RubyMine. I have the education license, so I get where you're coming from.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm-fresh, pre-proportioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. A busy schedule can make it easy to fall into your dinner time recipe rut. Keep mealtimes exciting with over 40 recipes to choose from every week, so there's always something delicious to discover with HelloFresh. Turn to HelloFresh Market for delicious add-ons and enjoy the season's limited fall flavors lineup. Feast on desserts like apple cider cake with caramel sauce, or please a crowd with appetizers like the barbecue pulled pork nachos. And don't forget the mini pumpkin cheesecake if you fancy a little treat. Amalith tried HelloFresh and said the kits came with exactly the right ingredients in the right amounts and saved him and his roommate from having to spend hours shopping around at the store. The dishes were all really simple to prepare and cook, and they came out tasting great. So support the show and go to hellofresh.com/50LDT and use code 50LDT for 50% off plus free shipping. That's hellofresh.com/50LDT and code 50LDT for 50% off plus free shipping. Quick bit of admin then. First of all, thank you everyone who supports us with PayPal and Patreon. We really do appreciate that. If you want to join those people, you can go to linuxdowntime.com/support. And remember that for various amounts on Patreon, you can get an advert-free RSS feed of either just this show or all the shows in the Late Night Linux family. And if you want to get in contact with us, you can email show@linuxdowntime.com. So Marcin, you are developing for a pretty technical, tech-savvy audience. You're not developing something that end users are going to be using. It's mostly kind of developer sysadmins and stuff. So that must be kind of nice in a way.
Yeah, it is. I don't need to deal with all the user friendliness, right? No, just kidding. Well, the nature of the tool I'm building is command line oriented. So the natural user interface is command line arguments, command line flags for it. So this is pretty simple, well understood interface for this audience. And it's very simple to implement. Like if I want to implement a new option for the record command, I can just implement it, add the new option name to the help message, and then it's there. It can be used. If it was a tool for broader audience, for asciinema, it wouldn't make sense. But if it was a different tool, in some cases, it would make sense to create a Gooey application. And with Gooey application, you have like all sort of, it's a can of worms because you need to decide what kind of Gooey toolkit to use.
Yeah, you just make it Electron. Easy.
Yeah, but then
it's the wrong answer.
No, it's always the wrong answer. But even if you make this wrong choice and you feel like, oh yeah, you win, then you need to build this whole UI, all the elements. You don't have like a building blocks. You need to reach for some front-end originated toolkits, like components, etc., based on CSS, etc. That's like, it's terrible. But anyway, if you choose something more sane like Qt or GTK, then you still need to make a lot of choices, like where to put this new button, or is it like a menu option, or is it like with command line applications, you just add a new flag and then you're done. So that really helps. So that's on the recorder side. On the player side, the player that you can see on asciinema.org site, which is the primary host for the recordings. The player can also be used standalone on your own website. You can just use it, download the JS bundle. And it has a lot of options as well. Like you can configure like the theme and other look and feel aspects of it. That's also rather simple. I just add a bunch of new options here and there, make sure it's stable, it works. But the audience is used to consuming JavaScript libraries like that.
It's still user friendliness, though. It's just for a very different class of user.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
I mean, the minute you bring a GUI into it, everything just gets weird. It's not even user friendliness necessarily as much as just you have to hit the right points for the right percentage of the user's individual psyches. And it gets really strange. Like I got twitted on the Late Night Linux Telegram the other day for still having the default app wallpaper in Telegram when I posted a screenshot. Like, that's the kind of nonsense you have to deal with once you get into developing GUI apps. And I'm very much with you there. Like, just count me out.
The user friendliness is a spectrum, and it's kind of context specific. So I try to make my tools user friendly for this type of audience. So I make sure the command line arguments are named appropriately. The names make sense. The options that you pass to the JavaScript player also should be reasonably understandable and useful in that context. So I usually strive for making it easy by default and doing like a reasonably good job by default with ability to hook into it or just extend it in your own way. So if you know what you're doing, you can, I'm a big proponent of like letting you do it, even some crazy stuff if you know what you're doing, but not overwhelming the default use case with those like advanced capabilities.
So you try to give it sane defaults and you try to make everything configurable, but the extra configurable stuff has sane defaults.
Exactly.
One of the big potential paper cuts that I encounter fairly frequently with command line only utilities is not only the arguments themselves and the defaults, but even sometimes just the parser that's used. Like, you'll see somebody that tries to write their own command line argument parser, and that's one of those deceptively difficult problems. You think, oh, this is easy. I just parse a bunch of stuff that somebody tacks something into the command line, and then you realize, well, wait, I have to recognize it no matter what order it's in, whether there are short form or long form arguments or a mix of both, some that take parameters, some that don't take parameters. It gets pretty easy to make something screwy and difficult to use if you're not really paying attention to what you're doing.
I absolutely despise Go's flags package.
Same
because
here.
No one should ever write a command line application that has whose flag format is dash long name. It should be dash letter or dash long name.
Abomination.
Of course.
The flags package just does it the wrong way.
Because you have to be able to give your short form argument that has its own parameter right there without even so much as a space in between if you want. Like God intended, and everybody berates me for when I do it online. But, it's nice when you do like say it's a command that, has an argument for like count, the iterations that it does. Like I want to be able to do just -C5, not have to do -C space 5. But frankly, I want either one to work because either could make sense. And that's the kind of thing that you get into with user friendliness there. It's a much more sharply bounded space than when you get into, user friendliness in a GUI app. But the concerns are very much all still really there. Your arguments have to not suck. Ideally, you want them to be memorable. I won't say nothing sucks worse, but few things suck worse than a command line app that has a bunch of arguments and you can never remember them because the dev named them something weird and unintuitive. Like the best command line apps are the ones that like 90% of the arguments, you don't even have to look them up in the man page. Like you could just, okay, well, this should support something like this. And let me type in what that should look like. And oh, hey, how about that? It works. Like that's user friendliness in the command line space.
So you're saying the opposite of tar then?
Oh.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It's a fine art. Like you can't imagine how ridiculous amount of time I spend when I introduce a new command line argument. Like I analyze it to the bone and like, is it a common letter used for this type of thing? Is it the first letter of the name of the thing it's doing? Is it colliding with another flag that is similar or something? It could be confusing. Like for me, it's always probably the hardest part of introducing a new option is finding a good name for it, because then if I choose wrong or like it turns out wrong, then I'm gonna deal with it for a long time.
When you're using a command line application, the flags are your user interface, and just as much thought should go into deciding what those flags should be called and the ergonomics of those as UX designers put into graphical applications.
And the implications sometimes. Like if you're doing, some kind of a data synchronization utility, for example, no idea why that would come to mind, but if you're doing something like that, almost everybody with that type of application will include a force flag. But in almost any situation that you would implement a force flag to make it do something that might be unsafe, you could instead have used -- unsafe. And those two potential arguments might do the exact same thing, but you're subtly telling your users different things by your selection of which argument does the exact same technical task. One of the other things that I tend to struggle with, struggle is a bad connotation. I don't really want to use that exactly. One of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about when I go to introduce a new argument to one of my own applications, I very frequently have a very specific task in mind that I do all the time, and I start to implement it, and then I think, okay, but let me back up a couple of steps. What similar tasks might other people do that I don't necessarily care about? But if I just kind of broaden the scope of this a little bit, I can make this applicable to thousands of people instead of me and 5 friends. Or if I broaden this, am I technically making more things possible, but are they things that almost nobody's gonna want to do? And I'm really screwing up the experience for the thousands of people that want to do the simpler, tighter scoped thing.
When you talked about the force thing there, I thought you were going to talk about recursive and whether to go lowercase or capital R, because that always catches me out. I can't remember which one it is, but I often will type it and get the error and, okay, I have to go capital.
That's easy. The correct answer is lowercase r always, and those apps that used uppercase R for recursive did it wrong.
I agree.
It's that simple.
That would be chmod, chown.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that always catches me out. Well, we should probably wrap things up. It's been great talking to you, especially about such a cool project. So thanks a lot for joining us. If people want to learn more about you and the project, where should they go?
You can go to asciinema.org, where you can scroll down to the footer, and there are a bunch of links. We have a Matrix channel. Join us, say hi. I also manage a Mastodon account. And also you can reach me at marcin@asciinema.org over email.
Right, well, I'll put links to all that stuff in the show notes then. But we'd better get out of here. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. But until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Amalith.
I've been Jim.
And I've been Marcin.
See you later.